Hello, everybody. Welcome into Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. I am Brandon Adams. We've reached one of our pivotal weeks of the year. It is championship week, rolling into our, final pre-bowl picks here as we make our selections against the spread here coming up. Many of you have been with us all year long, but if you haven't, here is how our contest goes. In just a moment, we'll get a chance to hear from the entire Dog Nation team as Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley all make their picks for the big games this weekend against the spread, including Georgia versus LSU in the SEC Championship. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they'll have a chance to weigh in and share their thoughts as well. And at that point in time, a consensus is formed, or as we say around here, it'll be a chance for Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews to go with the flow and join that consensus if he'd like to, or go against the grain and make his own pick for those big games here coming up this weekend. Of course, we've been doing this all year long, and we keep track of our scores. Some weeks, that's better news than others. But before we look at this week's games, let's get an update on the tote board, I guess, if you will, once again, after rivalry week last week. We were once again befelled by another push, 22-point number hitting exactly on that with Alabama against Auburn last week. But nonetheless, Dari Payro, after going 2-2 last week, finds himself at 34-27 on the year, right there on top of all of it. Connor Riley and I in a flat-footed tie right now. He and I both 3-1 last week at 32-29 on the year, just 2 games back of Mr. Payro. So kind of a fun battle down the stretch between us. Mike Griffith was 2-2 last week. That puts him at 30-31 on the year, but a chance to get over 500 here this week, obviously. And Jeff Sintel, congratulations to him, winning week last week at 3-1. Now at 29-32 on the year, so also a chance to get up and over 500 for the campaign. That was our look at what happened last week, and now we'll get ready to get our look at this week's slate of games, including the SEC Championship against Georgia and LSU coming up in a moment. But before that, let me remind you that all of this here on Go With The Flow is presented by our friends at R.S. Andrews. And you see Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews on the top of our rankings in our season-long contest, and as good as he is at picking games, he and the entire team at R.S. Andrews, even better than that when it comes to taking care of you for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That's what R.S. Andrews has been doing for a long time. As we say it around here, and they've said it themselves, story after story, they deliver a smile. So while it's kind of warm here lately, we know that the winter is coming, and when that winter gets here, just to borrow the phrase from Game of Thrones, when the winter gets here, you're going to want that heating system in your house ready to go to keep you toasty and warm all winter long. And if you need to get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs in order for that to be the case, our friends at R.S. Andrews can take good care of you on that. So make sure you find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, first up for us here this week, it is the SEC Championship with Georgia. Fresh off another undefeated season, second straight undefeated season for the Dogs. First time in program history that has happened at 12-0, taking on LSU as a 17.5-point favorite. Of course, the Tigers in this spot after a win against Alabama earlier this season, but kind of falling flat on its face in a chance to enter the game with some momentum, losing last week to what is arguably the league's worst team in Texas A&M, but still a remarkable first year for Brian Kelly there in Baton Rouge, albeit a big underdog on Saturday at 17.5 points for the game taking place inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You'd like to think that Georgia has a playoff spot already sewn up, but nonetheless, there is still plenty of motivation for the Dogs to bring home the SEC Championship. So with that in mind, Mike Griffith, we start with you. Georgia as a 17.5-point favorite. What's your pick on this game against the spread?
Yeah, I really hate this game. I would never bet this game in real life. I mean, you don't know the status of the LSU quarterback, and that's everything for them. I mean, he's a guy that game is based on his mobility, and he hurt his ankle against Texas A&M. We don't really know the status and how injured he still really is. Georgia really has not been playing its best football. We saw them outplayed by Georgia Tech for a half. You wonder if they were maybe looking ahead. And Stetson Bennett has not played his best football down the stretch. And you have a big game environment on top of it. So questionable motivation for both teams to the extent Georgia probably locked up a bid and LSU with no chance to make the playoffs. So I guess you take all those things out of it, and the history of this game, Georgia has scored points for the most part. A lot of these games have been blowouts. So even though I really don't want to, I'm going to give 17.5 points. That half a point could come back to bite me, but I'm going to go ahead and give it anyway and take Georgia.
And as Mike brings up, the status of Jaden Daniels is recording this on a Wednesday afternoon. We have heard reports out of Baton Rouge a couple times this week that he has been spotted in a walking boot. And so as you head towards the game on Saturday, his status is uncertain, although Georgia defensive lineman Zion Logue said this week they're exclusively preparing to face Daniels here in this game. So possibly some gamesmanship on both sides on that. But nonetheless, Jeff Sintel to you, where Georgia stands as a 17.5-point favorite.
Yeah, I don't have the same trepidations about this one. I don't think the number's too large. I think the main thing why is I think this is a program statement type win for Georgia. I think Brian Kelly would be lucky to get his program where Georgia is right now. It's year one of Brian Kelly. I think the most fascinating part of this game feels a lot like the Tennessee game to me. Georgia didn't take any transfers out of the portal for this season. LSU took 15. And I believe 8 of those guys are still currently starting for the Tigers. The 5-star count still looks really strong for Georgia. I think this is a game where LSU is more than enthused and zealous that it's got to this point. And I think for Georgia, this season has really started. Georgia plays 3-game seasons now at this point, and the first one of those is on Saturday in Atlanta. I expect a very big win.
So a lot of love for the Dogs here thus far. Connor, the number 17.5. How about your thoughts on Georgia and LSU?
You look at Georgia's best performances this year. They've come against the best teams. Oregon, obviously, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Those are the 3 highest-ranked wins that Georgia has right now. I expect it to be 4. I think this team is going to come out sharp and motivated. We've seen them play down to their competition this year, but we've also seen them play up when they need to be at their best, and I do think they need to be at their best on Saturday, and I think we're going to see that. So give me Georgia here minus the 17.5. If Jaden Daniels is healthy, we know he's going to be banged up entering the game. If Georgia can knock him around a little bit like they did Hendon Hooker, like they did Anthony Richardson, I wonder how long he stays in the game. That might make me feel even better about Georgia minus 17.5 here.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they like Georgia here in this spot there as well, as you might expect. 96% on the side of UGA minus the 17.5. I did a little bit of an extra look at LSU because it's obviously been a better first year for Brian Kelly than some would have expected. If you go back and look at their season win total before the year began, it was set at 7. They've already won 9. Obviously, that's based on a regular season number, so they've exceeded that by 2 games. And yet, on a per-game basis, they haven't actually really exceeded expectations all that much. They're 7-5 against the spread. In other words, while they have won more games than the experts initially thought, they haven't actually, with the way the season's played out, maybe won more games week to week than they were necessarily supposed to. So it's not like they come in here measurably, obviously better than what people thought about them prior to the season. In some cases, this just may be the SEC West eroding a little bit around them. And yet, I still am going to take LSU here plus the 17.5 points for the simple reason that I do believe that Georgia's motivated here. I do believe that Georgia wants to win this game, and I believe they will. I just think, once again, 17.5 is kind of a lot of points. I've said this now a few weeks in a row. Against Mississippi State, I turned out to be wrong. Against Kentucky, turned out to be right. Last week against Georgia Tech, I also kind of turned out to be right against a huge spread there. So I'm going to kind of ride this here a bit. Georgia's clearly got motivation to win, but I don't know that it necessarily needs to win by 100 points or anything like that. And frankly, I don't think anybody who doesn't pay attention to gambling bats an eye if Georgia only wins this 15, 16, 17 points. And yet that'd be good enough to get you to the pay window here with the Tigers. So I like Georgia to win the game. I'm imagining it's probably pretty comfortable, but 17.5 is still a lot of points here. So I'm going to take LSU plus the 17.5, take a flyer on that. As Mike Griffith said, maybe that half-point looms kind of big here. But the flow, though, decidedly with Georgia. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take UGA?
Man, this is tough. I've kind of been going back and forth on this all week, just kind of looking at this. I'm going to take Georgia here to cover that 17.5 points. I just think LSU losing to Texas A&M, they're probably looking ahead and looking forward to this game and with a chance to get the college playoffs. And that's kind of been gutted from them. So I just really question their motivation in the game. Even if they start out, with some intensity, if Georgia starts to build the lead, I think they just may give up. So I like Georgia to cover the 17.5.
So that is Dari Payro on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs there. Big number in the SEC championship, and obviously one of those games which you think the college football playoff status of the Dogs is already decided. However, for our next game, that is anything but true. It's Friday night from Las Vegas, the Pac-12 championship game, as USC gets ready to take on Utah. Trojans here in this spot, a 3-point favorite, a rematch, and a game won by Utah earlier this year in Salt Lake City. But for USC, a chance to earn its way into the college football playoff, number 4 in the most recent top 25 that came out on Tuesday night. Yet conventional wisdom would lead you to believe that the Trojans need another win in order to make this year's postseason tournament, and they'll do so, as I said, against a team that got the best of them a little earlier this season. So, Mike Griffith, I come back to you. The number is 3 for number 4 USC taking on Utah in Las Vegas. What's your thoughts on the Pac-12 title game, which takes place on Friday night?
Yeah, the climate-controlled facility, I think, is conducive to USC's high-powered offense. I think the first time they played Utah, it was in Salt Lake City. You mentioned they lost that game by a point. This might end up being a push. I thought it opened at 2.5. I see it's up to 3. I think I heard there was actually a $900,000 bet made on you. Was that you, Brandon? Somebody put $900,000 on USC. I'm going to take USC and give the points. The Pac-12 really needs USC to be there, and doggone it, it's Las Vegas, and what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
So that is Mike Griffith on the side of the Trojans here, minus the 3 points. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
Yeah, this one's tricky. The rematch relevance theory, I think it's very hard to beat the same team twice. We've seen that over and over. I think there's the more to play for theory there as well. Here's what I see happening. I see USC winning the game but not covering the 3 points. Conversely, I'm going to take Utah on the points on this one.
All right, so split decision here thus far. Connor, how about your thoughts on the Pac-12 title game?
Look, I've told you before, TCU, underdog, they're going to win outright. Michigan, underdog, they're going to win outright. Utah, underdog, they're going to win outright. USC reminds me a lot of Terry Benedict. He doesn't make me laugh, but he also doesn't make me cry. And so I think Utah is going to do their best Danny Ocean impression. And as someone who has watched many Ocean's movies, you know that what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. And I think Utah is going to find a way to win this game, as they did last year when, as Jeff points out, while yes, it is hard to beat a team twice, Utah did that against Oregon. I think they're going to do it again against USC. Give me Utah +3. Give me Utah money line.
There you go. Connor Riley coming in heavy on the side of the Utes there right there. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they do not agree. 81% on USC here at this point in time, kind of reflecting the public nature of what the Trojans have kind of become. And that's one of the things I have to sort of point out here, which is that if you go back and look when these two teams played each other, back during the early portion of the season, you're talking about to see where USC here is at this point in time, you're definitely paying a premium on taking USC in this spot. I don't think there's any doubt in that. You're paying a premium on them. They're just 3-3 since the game against Utah before. Kind of similar situation there for Utah there as well. So you're paying a little bit of a premium to take USC right now compared to what you could have gotten when these teams played for the first time back in October. And yet, nonetheless, it's worked for me 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to kind of ride the same little rhythm here, which is that for everything you want to say about Lincoln Riley when he's gotten into the postseason, obviously that has not gone particularly well. 3 times, 2017, 2018, 2019, kind of long winning streaks to get his team into the college football playoff. And that seems to be the case of what's kind of going on right here, too. They're clearly playing their best football against the stiffest competition here late in the season. And so while I am admittedly paying a little bit of a premium price on USC minus the 3 compared to the first meeting, I sort of feel okay with that right now. I do kind of agree with Mike. If there's any kind of questionable officiating decision in this game, I believe it goes the direction of the Trojans. So I've got to kind of get that on my side here a little bit too. Against my better judgment, I'm going to take USC minus the 3 points here in this spot. That puts the flow on the side of USC there as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Trojans?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Trojans, but they got the little victory fingers that they do. They went out and got Lincoln Riley, and he's instantly turned around that program. This team's playing for something. They're playing for college football playoffs. He's earning that free private jet that USC gave him. He's going to game plan here. It's tough to beat someone twice. Lincoln Riley has got the it factor, and that's going to be the difference in the game. If for some reason they lost, like Connor says, that's when it's going to get weird between Alabama and Ohio State fighting over who gets in that last spot.
Yeah, certainly there is chaos that has a chance to kind of enter into this discussion, but it takes a USC loss to get you there. So we'll see how that happens on Friday. Ironic that the most dramatic moment of the weekend could be taking place at the beginning of the weekend there on Friday night. And as Dari Payro also points out, the idea of USC, which likes to put the two fingers in the air, if there is a meeting coming with Georgia, expect to hear from my lawyers on that, because go for 2-22 is obviously what we believe around here. So they may get a little C&D there in L.A. if it indeed comes down to that. But for now, we'll turn our attention to another conference title game that takes place, this one also with playoff implications, although there's a case to be made that the 12-0 undefeated TCU Horned Frogs could be in the playoff no matter what, even if they were to lose on Saturday to Kansas State. Wildcats found themselves in the top 10 of the CFP top 25 that came out on Tuesday night, 9-3 on the season. Losses to teams such as Texas, Tulane, which could also be in a New Year's Six Bowl, and obviously a loser in the first matchup with TCU here earlier this season. Horned Frogs coasted easily past Iowa State this past weekend to put themselves in the spot of being undefeated. They're in Arlington, Texas at Jerry World with a chance to make it to the college football playoff, something they failed to do in a similar situation back in 2014, and a title ultimately won by Ohio State, the team that got in over TCU and its league foe Baylor along the way that season. But in this particular spot, TCU looking at being a 2.5-point favorite here against Kansas State. Mike Griffith, we come back to you. Horned Frogs favored by 2.5. What's your feeling on the spread?
Yeah, this is another interesting game. Kansas State actually led TCU 28-10 the first time these teams met, and TCU had to come from behind. I'm going to keep riding the favorites in these conference championship games. I know that some people think that TCU's in even with a loss. I'm not necessarily convinced of that. I think it's in the Big 12 best interest for TCU to win that game, and that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, as you said, and I'm going to take TCU and give the points.
So Mike Griffith on the side of TCU here right now. Jeff Sintel to you for TCU and Kansas State.
Yeah, I think I'm going to overanalyze this one. I'm going to just mark this one down as what TCU has to play for. I think I'm going to take TCU in this one. I'm going to lay the points. Give me the Horned Frogs.
So a lot of love for the favorite here. Connor, is it that easy for TCU staring 13-0 right here in the face?
It's really not. This is a good Kansas State team. They were dealing with some quarterback issues in that first game against TCU. I think they're much more comfortable with what they have in both Adrian Martinez, if he's able to play, and the backup, whose name escapes me at this moment, if he is not. I'm going to take TCU here, and I'm real worried about doing it. I'm begging you guys, Horned Frogs, I'd love to see you guys in the playoff. I think you guys have had a great season. You should absolutely be rewarded for it. Please don't mess around and find out what happens if you guys lose, because I do think there is still a chance that they might be knocked out of the playoff because they have the audacity to be one of the best teams in their conference and represent the Big 12 in the Big 12 title game. And I hope they don't lose. I'm going to pick them to cover this weekend. I was dead wrong about them last weekend playing a close game against Iowa State. Give me TCU here -2.5, but please don't mess around with this game.
Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they're joining the fray too, but not by a wide margin, just 55% on the side of TCU here right now. And this is one of those situations where maybe I've got a little bit of soccer on the brain, where sometimes you see in this World Cup where teams that feel like they don't have a ton to play for end up playing a little bit of tight, and they're careful. I thought maybe U.S., not that I know anything about soccer, but they got a little careful maybe late against Iran going back to a Tuesday, and you sort of wonder, is there a little bit of tightness for TCU in this game against Kansas State? Once again, to kind of go back and look at the earlier meeting between these two, TCU did win by 10 that day as a 3.5-point favorite, and they have gone 4-1 against the number since then. So clearly they are justifying the extra value now placed on them from a spread standpoint here in this spot. But as Connor pointed out, quarterback injury was a big mitigating factor for the Wildcats there that day. And the fact of the matter is Kansas State is just good. They are, I think, almost certainly the best team that nobody ever really talks about. Not only are they 9-3 on the season, they're actually 8-3-1 against the spread. I do believe that TCU is going to be in the playoff no matter what. I'm surprised that I feel that way, but I do. But against the number here, I'm actually taking Kansas State plus the points. The flow on the side of TCU. Dari, I think that for a Kansas State team that's been better than you realize, and for a TCU team that's kind of played it close and dangerous all year long, I think the Hypnotoad might kind of finally run into a little bit of trouble here. I'll take the Wildcats plus the points. You want to go with the flow, though, and take TCU here?
Yeah, I'm going to take TCU. I don't think it's enough points for me to take Kansas State here. Maybe if it was like 6, I'd probably take Kansas State. But I think TCU is going to find a way to get it done, just like they've done in any of the tight games. They kind of find a way. 2.5 points. I think that's enough for them to cover.
No doubt they have proven a lot here this year. You care about ESPN, FPI, and things like strength of record. You see TCU right there at the top of the country, so clearly their resume is playoff worthy. And as Connor Riley said, you hope that one blemish, if it does come, doesn't knock them out of that conversation, because I think they have clearly proven themselves to be a playoff level team, and you hate to see them punished on the basis of losing a 13th game, something that teams like Ohio State aren't currently being asked to play. Moving on here on Conference Championship Saturday, a game that at one point in time might seem like it had a little bit of pedigree to it when Clemson was a playoff contender and when North Carolina was at least a loosely defined playoff contender, but now that is no more really for either side. Clemson losing to its in-state rival South Carolina last week, but still playing in Charlotte on Saturday night as a 7.5-point favorite against UNC. So, Mike Griffith, we come back to you for a Clemson team still ranked in the top 10, but reeling, it would seem, a bit after pretty ugly losses to both Notre Dame and South Carolina. What do you think about the Tigers here favored by 7.5?
Boy, what a downer for this game, right? Georgia Tech beats North Carolina a couple weeks ago, and Clemson and Dabo stubbornly clinging to a quarterback that's going down the tubes right before our eyes. Thank goodness we don't have to watch this game. I'm going to take Clemson, but only because I think they have a good defense, even though their offense is not faring very well lately. So begrudgingly, I'll take Clemson in a game that I have absolutely no interest in beyond this show.
So, Mike, on the side of Clemson here for a game that admittedly has, as we said, lost a good bit of luster. Jeff Sintel to you for the ACC title game between Clemson and North Carolina, with the number standing at 7.5.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those games that you sit there and you scratch your head and you kind of wonder where college football is at when Clemson in the ACC championship is irrelevant. There's a lot of, fumes coming off what Clemson has ended their season. I'm going to give a vote of confidence here to the Tigers. I think a lot of that was Clemson's bad, but I think some of that was South Carolina's good in that game. It was still a very close, hard-fought game. I like Clemson in this one. I like them to, whatever it means, to establish their ACC superiority in this one. I can't even get that one out of my mouth without a straight face, but give me the Tigers here regardless of the points.
So a lot of love for the favorite here at Clemson. Connor Riley, how about you for the air quotes here, big one in Charlotte?
I can't believe I'm going to do this, but the ACC Coastal is a college football institution. It is going away after this game. The ACC is doing away with divisions after this year. This North Carolina team found every way to lose to Georgia Tech, found every way to lose to NC State. But look, Spencer Rattler's not that good. He threw for 360 yards against this against this Clemson defense a week ago. I get, harping on DJ Uiagalelei and that offense not being good. But the talent that Clemson has in its front seven, for them to be this poor defensively, I think is maybe just as worrying as what we've seen from them on the offensive side of the ball. And Drake May, Josh Downs is still a talented North Carolina offense. That 7.5 points is big. So give me North Carolina here plus the 7.5. I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel great about Clemson right now either.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they disagree. 68% on the side of Clemson here minus the points. However, I completely 100% agree. In fact, I am jumping up and down about this. I think, and this is one of the reasons why you should pay attention to games like this if you care about gambling, I think there's a ton of value on North Carolina here in this spot. As Connor said, he had the big game for Rattler a week ago, 360 yards, did throw 2 picks, but he also threw 2 touchdowns. But the fact is that Clemson has really regressed defensively. They're just 74th nationally in terms of passing yards allowed per game. This is one of those things where they have been so bad offensively, and I probably blame the Clemson coaching staff for that maybe more than I blame Uiagalelei, although I'm still not quite so sure what kind of player he is. In a better system, he may be a better player. But whatever you diagnose it as, they're terrible offensively. And that has actually, I think, obscured the fact that they're nowhere near as good defensively as they used to be. You know the story with North Carolina. They really don't stop anybody. But, man, oh, man, can they score with Drake May at quarterback? I think there's a lot of value here on North Carolina plus the 7.5 for this game in Charlotte. So if you care about the college football playoff, you may not care about this game at all. But if you'd like to gamble, I think this one is worth a look. And I think the Tar Heels are the right side. Dar, you want to go with the flow, though, and take Clemson?
No, I can't do that. I actually like Carolina a lot in this game. I think their offense is enough to keep the game close. Even if they're losing, even if they get down 2 touchdowns, I mean, they can score so fast. 7.5 points seems like a gift. Give me the Tar Heels to cover this game, maybe even outright win this.
There you go. So a little bit of late love coming in on North Carolina to kind of balance out what we heard a little earlier. One more conference title game to pick, and this is also a game in which there are playoff implications because one of the teams involved, although maybe the berth is already secure, in Lucas Oil Stadium, a venue that will always be special and dear to the hearts of Georgia fans. But this time you see Michigan hosting somewhat surprising Big Ten West winner Purdue. The number here, 17 points. Obviously, Michigan getting in by virtue of its win last week at Ohio State. And obviously the Wolverines still coming in at number 2 in the college football playoff top 25. And yet almost certainly in the playoff no matter the outcome here in this spot. So we're talking about another big number for a team that seems to have its playoff fortunes completely secure. But Mike Griffith, back to you here for Michigan minus the 17. How you feel about the Big Ten title game?
Well, no distractions in Ann Arbor with the World Cup, Brandon. Michigan was only 9th in the Big Ten in soccer this year. So I don't think that the World Cup is going to factor into this one, nor do I think that Purdue's close proximity in West Lafayette, Indiana to Indianapolis, I don't think that's going to help them much either. You know, you look at the series history, and Purdue has been a tricky game for some teams, but not for Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. So as much as I hate to lay all those points down on Michigan, a team that we saw struggle recently, just really needed a call to beat Illinois. You think about how a really bad call turned the Big Ten upside down, or the college football playoffs. Michigan getting a really bad call to go their favor to beat Illinois. They should have lost that game. If the officials need to come into play in Indianapolis, they will. I'm going to take Michigan and give the points. Everybody wants to see Big Blue in the college football playoffs once again.
So that is Mike Griffith on the side of Michigan, and also calling for officiating controversy in 3 of the 5 Power 5 conference championship games for this particular weekend. Jeff Sintel, how about for you when it comes to Michigan and Purdue? The number is 17.
Yeah, Brendan, you're right about how Lucas Oil Stadium will always be sanctified for a lot of us here. I'm picking a letdown here. I don't think by any means that Purdue is going to beat Michigan. But I'm of the theory that you can only really get your team up, geek your team up for about 4 or 5 games a year, maybe even 2 or 3. You look at Purdue's season; they've played a lot of teams close, except for I believe an Indiana State team, and then I guess except for mighty Iowa that Connor's always trumpeting each week on this show. I think Purdue's got a team that can play some pretty close games. The one thing that scares me though is the emergence of Donovan Edwards, and I say scares me in terms of this pick. I know, I guess Michigan's quote-unquote lead back has been out for the last few weeks. Don't expect him to play, but if you ask me, I think Donovan Edwards is probably the better back already. I like this one to be closer than what a lot of the experts think, even closer than one of the conspiracy officiating theorists might think. I'm going to take the points here and take Purdue.
So split decision here between our 2 riders when it comes to Michigan-Purdue. Connor, we come to you once again to break the tie.
I am picking Michigan here based solely off the fact they were essentially in the same scenario a season ago, going into a game against Iowa. People thought, finally they get the big win over Ohio State. They're in for a letdown. They blew the doors off Iowa. I think this Purdue team is worse than that Iowa team. The Big Ten West is not very good this year. And I think Michigan is going to come out and lay the smack down. So give me Michigan here minus the 17 points.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they agree 88% on the side of Michigan against Purdue. And I'm going to point out some numbers that people are kind of aware of, at least for folks like that watch this show that follow college football very closely. Historically, Purdue has 17 wins in program history when unranked and facing a top 5 ranked team, the likes of which that Michigan is right now. And a lot of that has actually come in the Jeff Brom era. He's 3-1 in those circumstances in his career, going back, to twice last year doing it. Don't get too excited here, against Iowa and Michigan State. So Purdue has a history of knocking off top 5 teams when unranked. Jeff Brom in particular has done that, including twice a year ago. I don't expect him to win this game, but I do like Purdue plus the 17 points. And I'll be transparent here. When I look at the 3 teams who are either in the playoff or very likely in the playoff between TCU, Michigan, and Georgia, when I look at all 3 of them playing as a favorite, Georgia and Michigan as huge favorites, TCU is a narrow favorite, I think my goal here is to go 2-1. I don't believe I can win all three of these, but I believe I might could win two, either for teams like Michigan and Georgia that coast easily and maybe take their foot off the gas, or a team like TCU that has a little more to play for and ends up playing tight because of it. I'm going to go with the dogs in all three of those Saturday instances in the hopes that I win two of those. And Purdue obviously has the track record to justify it, given what they've done when unranked against these kinds of teams in the past. So I'll take Purdue plus the 17, maybe being too cute here, but I feel okay about it. Dari, the flow, though, on the side of Michigan. You want to go with the flow and take the Wolverines.
Yeah, I'm going to lay the points here. When I look at this game, I mean, I can see kind of both sides. I can see where Michigan may have a letdown or something like that. But I always go back to, how is Purdue going to score? The offense is just so bad. They got a pretty good defense, but the offense is just really bad. And I think Michigan's is way more physical on defense. So I'm going to lay the points. I'm going to go with Michigan to cover the 7.
So that is our final look at the Power 5 Conference Championship games for this weekend. And with that said, we now get to look at the entire board. A smaller board, admittedly, this week because we've reached the end of the season, but nonetheless, some value to be had, whether you're thinking about Group of 5 or season or point totals or whatever your thoughts might be on that. And so, Mike Griffith, we come back to you. We get the entire board at your disposal. You got a best bet for us from something we haven't talked about already.
Brandon, this is tough, but I'm going to take the under in the Georgia LSU game. I know we've talked about Georgia and how they've scored in the past. I just don't see LSU scoring many points. I took Georgia and gave the points in this game, but I'm going to take the under in this game.
51 is that total. Georgia LSU over under 51. Mike on the side of the under. Jeff Sintel, how about for you? Anything on the board, your thought, your opportunity?
Intriguing. I'm going to go over in Georgia LSU. I just see a lot of things. I see a big rushing day for Stetson Bennett with a lot of prop bets you see out there probably say he doesn't do that for the Dogs anymore. I see Brock Bowers, or at least the Georgia tight ends, really controlling this game with a lot of yards. I think Georgia plays better on a fast track, and I think maybe it might be a situation where do I think LSU gets to 10 or 13 points? Does that mean Georgia gets to 38? That's kind of what I see cranking out on Saturday.
So there you go. Connor Riley, how about for you? Anything on the board at your disposal here right now?
Anything. How about 3 picks? Last week wasn't a great week, 1 and 2 in my best bets, but I did not cowardly give out a money line favorite only to see them lose, as some other people on this panel did here. So I do at least have that going for me. I got 3 underdogs. I got 3 of them all winning outright. Give me Utah money line, give me UCF money line, and give me Fresno State money line in the Mountain West. I like all 3 of those teams. Utah is a 3-point underdog. UCF and Fresno State are 3.5-point underdogs. I like all of them to win outright. 3 money line underdogs. You want to put them in a parlay? I encourage that. I would maybe potentially be doing that myself this weekend.
Interesting.
Those are my picks. UCF, Utah, Fresno State, all underdogs, all money line to win outright too. Last show of the year for us, and we're gonna let it ride big this weekend.
Interesting stuff there from Connor Riley on that. He obviously making fun of me because last week I did take Ole Miss, who was just slightly less than a touchdown favorite against Mississippi State. Took him on the money line to avoid, seeing the 1-point victory. Obviously, it ended up not being a factor. Mississippi State lost the game. Thankfully, I shook that off. Went 4-1 last week. So if you're scoring at home, I was 4-1 last week, 2-1 the week before that, 2-1 the week before that, 8-3 in my last 11 when it comes to these best bet picks. And I got 3 more picks for you here for this weekend there as well. Let's go to Detroit, Michigan, Ford Field for the Mid-American Conference Championship, where I think it's safe to say the most talented team in that league all year long has been the Rockets of Toledo. They've also been one of the more underwhelming teams in that league there as well. 7-5 on the year, losers of 2 straight. They're still a 1.5 favorite against the Ohio Bobcats, but I'm going to go Ohio plus a 1.5 here. The pride of Athens, Ohio, maybe a little bit of kinship here when it comes to the 2 Athens schools. I'm just going to take a little bit of a stand here against Toledo that has had a million chances to show you what they're all about this year. Never done that. So I'll take Ohio University plus the 1.5. I will also go Sun Belt Championship. This is a game that's actually played on campus. The Mid-American Conference, the neutral site game, this is an on-campus game for Troy as a 7.5-point favorite against Coastal Carolina. The big story here is Grayson McCall, the Chanticleer's quarterback, at least as it stands right now, it does not look like he's going to play, has not played since early November, and it seems like he may miss this weekend's game there too, but also maybe potentially a little bit of a distraction for Jamie Chadwell, who's been in the mix for other coaching jobs and ultimately hasn't taken one as of yet. But we've seen these coaches who've been job shopping, their teams haven't played particularly well, including maybe even Willie Fritz for Tulane against UCF, as Connor Riley mentioned there a little earlier. Troy has been way better than you realize, so much so that they're 7.5-point favorite here in this particular game. So I'll take the Trojans here minus that. And let's go back to the ACC title game here just for a moment. You know the story for UNC. They're very good offensively. They're very bad defensively. But the truth is the under has hit half the time in UNC games this season, 6 times in total. They are not an automatic over, even though they have big offense, bad defense. The Clemson offense is terrible. For me, this is a little bit of a stand against Clemson all the way around. I think UNC scores points, and frankly, I don't think this game's going to be particularly close, which gives you a chance to bring that under home here, I think. So I'm going to go under 63.5 in the ACC title game. Troy minus 7.5 against Coastal, and Ohio plus 1.5 in the neutral site MAC championship game against Toledo. So, Dari Payro, back to you for anything you want on the board for this weekend.
Yeah. I was pretty good at my picks last week. I did lose one of them with Coastal Carolina. I think they may bounce back this week, although Troy's been pretty good against the spread throughout the year. My lock of the week is actually a game that was moved to Friday. It's going to be played on Friday. Is Buffalo minus 11. Absolutely love them. They're going to easily cover that number.
Yeah, it's the only regular season game to be played this weekend. Dari, is that moved because was that canceled? Like, why is that game being played this weekend? It's the only regular season game of the weekend.
I think that was because all the snow, the weather from last weekend. They ended up canceling that game and moved it.
Yeah, so Dari on the side of the Bulls, the Buffalo Bulls. I think they used to be the Braves, but they're the Bulls now, I think, on the side of the Bulls there in that Mid-American Conference regular season game. So that'll do it for us here for Championship Week. One more time, I'll give you a shout-out for our friends at R.S. Andrews who have taken such good care of us all year long. It's a lot of fun to sit here and make these picks against the spread and have this conversation. We could not do it without the great sponsorship love that Dari Payro and the entire team at R.S. Andrews show to us each and every week here on this show. So my invitation to you is to show them some love there as well. If you want to sit down and watch some games, but you have some sort of plumbing issue that prevents that from happening, like say your water heater has gone out, don't forget that R.S. Andrews in many cases can replace that water heater the same day. So you just need to find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. They've taken great care of us, and we certainly appreciate all the work they've done to take great care of all of you there too. We'll see you one more time before the year is done for a fun bowl show, but we'll take a few weeks off before we get to that. So enjoy Conference Championship weekend here. Good luck to the dogs, of course, and good luck to your underdogs for those of you who have some bets down on games. We'll talk to you again next time right here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews.